The Newfie Air 96 V2 is a top option for a low-profile mechanical keyboard if you need a number pad, but how does it compare to the Keychron K17 Pro? Keychron put several good features into the K17 Pro, so let's talk about how they stack up. Before we dive in, I want to mention that Newfie sent me the Air 96 V2 for the purpose of reviewing it, which I did in a separate video. So if you like the full review of the Air 96 V2, I'll put that link down in the description and in the corner of the video. I purchased the K17 Pro myself, and this video is not sponsored. Neither manufacturer asked me to make it. However, I do have affiliate links in the description for you if you're interested in picking up either of these keyboards and you would like to support this channel. As with my other comparison videos, we're going to talk about the pros and cons between these two keyboards, but first let's do a quick rundown of some of the specifications and the features of both of them, and then we'll do the sound test comparison as well. Both the Keychron K17 Pro and the Newfie Air 96 V2 offer a number pad in a more compact layout than a traditional 100%. Their dimensions are similar, but the K17 Pro is slightly longer with 13.8 millimeters in extra length, and the Air 96 V2 is slightly deeper with 12.1 millimeters in extra width. Their weights are very similar, with the Air 96 V2 at 663 grams and the K17 Pro at 679 grams. The build materials are similar as both feature an aluminum top frame and ABS plastic bottom. They both offer 2-position fold-out feet for 3 total typing angles, and both are thin enough to use without a wrist rest in their flat position. The K17 Pro features a 2,000 mAh battery, while the Air 96 V2 offers a 4,000 mAh battery. The expected life with no lighting turned on is 167 hours for the K17 Pro and 220 hours for the Air 96 V2. Both keyboards offer 3 Bluetooth connections, but the Air 96 V2 also offers 2.4 GHz wireless as a 4th wireless connection. Both offer 1000 Hz polling over the wired connection. Both keyboards utilize Gateron low-profile switches with 3 options available in the K17 Pro and 7 options available in the Air 96 V2. The Air 96 V2 includes full RGB lighting and corner LEDs, while the K17 Pro comes in 3 different varieties: white backlighting with non-hot swap switches, RGB with non-hot swap switches, and RGB with hot swappable switches. Keycaps on both are double-shot PBT and are not shine-through, although shine-through low-profile keycaps can be purchased separately. Both keyboards feature QMK firmware that is customizable with VIA software on Windows, Mac, and Linux. The price of the Air 96 V2 with Gateron switches is $129.95 or $139.95 with Newfie switches. The price of the K17 Pro is $99 for the white backlight non-hot swap option, $109 for the RGB non-hot swap option, or $119 for the RGB hot swappable option. All right, so now let's get into the pros and cons between these two. First up, let's just talk about the layout here. Both keyboards feature a compact number pad layout, with the Air 96 in the traditional 96% compact layout here with no spacing whatsoever between the arrow keys and the number pad and the rest of the key area. It's all just smushed together. While the K17 Pro has a little bit of a modified layout here with your nav keys in between your main key area and your number pad. And there's just ever so slightly a little bit of spacing around the arrow keys here, not quite as squished together as the Air 96, but there's still not really a ton of spacing here. Both of these feature a tactile bump on the keycap for the up arrow key to help you identify that up arrow key with your right hand while you're typing. So if you think you might be bothered by this super compact layout on the Air 96, then it's possible the K17 Pro might be just a little bit more comfortable for you, but it's still pretty compact, and in terms of dimensions, it is only just ever so slightly wider or longer than the Air 96. So no real advantage to one or the other there. It's just a matter of which layout appeals to you more. The K17 Pro, though, does also have the knob in the top right corner if you prefer to have a knob. But there's one thing I want to point out about that. The knob is not very tall, and it's pretty squished in here in the corner, very close to these two keys. So if you don't grip it just right, you have to grip it just right from the top here in order to turn it without causing an issue. If you grip it kind of more like you might grip a knob on other keyboards that have a knob with a little bit more separation, you'll actually hit these two keys with probably your thumb or one of your other fingers, and that annoyed me a little bit while I was using the K17 Pro. Now moving on to customization with the Air 96 V2, we're now tied because as far as compatibility goes, we have QMK firmware on both of them. Via compatibility, you can now customize these on Windows, Mac, and Linux. But if there is one very small advantage to the K17 Pro in the customization space, there's actually 3 more keys on the K17 Pro. It's got 103 keys versus 100, so you've got a couple more keys that you could potentially customize with a macro or to do a different function. Now in terms of wireless connectivity, we're gonna have a Pro here in favor of the Air 96 V2 because it has 3 Bluetooth connections just like the K17 Pro, but it also has a 2.4 gigahertz wireless connection as well with a receiver that has a 1000 hertz polling rate. Now I do want to mention, as I did in my review video of the Air 96 V2, I did run into a little bit of a stability issue with the 2.4 gigahertz connection when I placed the receiver at my normal location and distance, which is about 3 feet away from the keyboard, with just a couple of minor obstructions in the way. However, that resolved itself when I used a USB cable to reposition the receiver closer to the keyboard with a clear line of sight. So it doesn't seem to be the actual connection itself. It seems to be, maybe it just needs to be a little bit closer and have absolutely no obstructions in the way. Now for lighting, both of these keyboards have north-facing LEDs, and the K17 Pro is available in a white backlight only version, which is not hot swappable. So I should point that out. If you want the white backlight only, that's a non-hot swap version. But there is this full RGB version as well. And then the Air 96 V2, of course, has full RGB as well as the 2 corner indicator LED bars here that are on the edges. Now in terms of comparison, the Air 96 V2, in my opinion, my observation, seems to get a little bit brighter than the K17 Pro lights do, and I also like having those side indicator lights as well. And as far as the number of modes you have, the K17 Pro has 22 RGB modes and the Air 96 V2 has 40 RGB modes. So in terms of the overall execution of the lighting, I would say I have to give the slight edge to the Air 96 V2, but you know, they're pretty close in terms of how they perform from an RGB standpoint. Now, neither of these keyboards come with shine-through keycaps, so if you're looking for that, the Air 96 V2 has the option of adding on a set of shine-through keycaps for $19 when you buy it from Newfie. And when it comes to battery life, we have another Pro here in favor of the Air 96 V2. It's not a blowout here, but there is an edge for the Air 96 V2. Of course, if you're using the wired connection all the time, this won't matter as much to you, but the K17 Pro has a 2000 milliamp hour battery with an expected use time of 167 hours with all of the lights off. Meanwhile, the Air 96 V2 has a 4000 milliamp hour battery and an expected use time of 220 hours with all of the lights off. So it's not a massive difference there, but that difference from about 160 or 170 hours to 220 hours when you're not using any of the lighting, you know, that's the difference of a few days of use, depending on how long per day you're actually using your keyboard. So there is an edge there for the Air 96 V2. Now with your lights on, the battery time is going to depend on what brightness level you have them set to. So with the Air 96 V2, you're talking anywhere from 35 to 57 hours of use time. Keychron quotes 87 hours on the lowest setting, but they don't give you an estimate on the highest setting, so I don't know what the low end of that range is. So there might actually be a slight advantage here to the K17 Pro if you are using the RGBs. If you're not though, the battery life is gonna be better on the Air 96 V2. All right, so now we've come to the most subjective aspects of these keyboards, and that would be your typing feel and sound and the overall design. Overall, the Air 96 V2 has a nice premium feel to it with the aluminum top frame and the more controlled sound profile that it has. It's a little bit deeper, a little bit more controlled. You've got a switch pad in here. You've got some silicone under the space bar. It just has a little bit of an upscale typing feel and sound to it. There's also no unwanted sounds with the Air 96 V2. You're not gonna hear a bunch of rattle or that high-pitched kind of plasticky sound with the Air 96 V2. It is well controlled. The K17 Pro has a floating key design, meaning there's no case around the outside. Basically, there's nothing here. You're just looking straight at the side of the switches and the keycaps. And because of that, the sound just kind of escapes out. It doesn't actually have like a case to resonate or bounce around in. So that usually means a little bit of a less deeper sound, a little bit of a higher pitch sound, and also possibly a little bit of a quieter sound. Unfortunately, my K17 Pro at least has quite a bit of rattle coming from the stabilizers as well. And I have to say that's pretty consistent actually with other Keychron low profile keyboards I've tested. It seems they haven't quite been able to tame the stabilizer rattle in their low profile boards. So there's a little bit of unwanted sound here, at least in my opinion. Both of these keyboards use Gateron low profile switches. By the way, the Newfie switches are interchangeable here. So you could actually buy Newfie switches and put them in your Keychron low profile keyboard if you wanted to. So overall, in terms of sound and feel, it's really a matter of personal preference here, at least except for the stabilizer rattle that you get on the K17 Pro. In my opinion, I personally prefer the sound and feel of the Air 96 V2. I think it feels a little bit more refined, a little bit more premium compared to the K17 Pro. That's just my opinion on it. You could certainly have a different opinion and that would be fine. Now with regard to the keycaps, again, I personally prefer the look and feel of the Newfie keycaps a little bit better. And of course, still subjective, but Keychron's low profile keycaps, I personally find them to feel a little bit odd, especially at first when you're coming from a different keyboard to one of their low profile keyboards. And that's because their low profile keycaps have a very slight forward slant to them. So it's like your fingers are resting at a down angle. And it's deceiving because when you look at it, you don't really see it quite so much, but you definitely feel it. And personally, every time I've used a low profile keyboard from Keychron, I've gotten used to it very quickly. It's just, in general, I don't prefer that. I prefer the more flat feel of the Newfie keycaps. But again, we're talking subjectivity here, so you could definitely prefer these keycaps from Keychron, and there would be nothing wrong with that. And lastly, when it comes to the overall design here, this is probably as subjective as it gets. You either like a keyboard's design or you don't. But I do want to point out just one thing here. If you plan on taking these keyboards with you on the go, Keychron's low profile keyboard design has these floating keys, which are basically unprotected. There's no case around the edge here. Honestly, I think either one of these, you should probably be putting some type of protective cover on if you're gonna be throwing it in a backpack or something to take it with you. But if you're not gonna put a cover on it, I feel like the Air 96 and just Newfie's low profile keyboard design in general is a little bit safer in terms of being durable and less prone to having the edges of your keycaps getting smacked into by stuff in your bag. So I just wanted to point that out in terms of a little bit of something objective about the design. Now in terms of price, the Air 96 V2 is the more expensive option here at $129 with Gateron switches or $139 with Newfie switches, while the hot swappable RGB version of the K17 Pro goes for $119, so just a little bit less. At the end of the day, these are both nice low-profile keyboards that offer full customization and a number pad. My personal choice here would be the Air 96 V2 because of the sound and feel along with the design. I think it's just a little more appealing to me personally, and it's always nice to have the 2.4 gigahertz connection if you need it. That being said, I don't see any major deal breakers here with the K17 Pro. It's just a matter of slightly lower battery life and, for me, kind of annoying, stabilizer rattle here that you could always try to tinker with and see if you could get rid of. But otherwise, no major downsides here with the K17 Pro. It would be a fine choice if you need a number pad and you like that low profile design. So that'll do it for this comparison. Let me know down in the comments what you think of these two keyboards, and if you have one of them, how are you liking it? As I mentioned, I've got affiliate links in the description to both of these keyboards if you're interested in picking up either one and you would like to support this channel. Don't forget to subscribe to the Semi Pro Tech and Gear channel as well if you want to see more content like this. Thanks everybody. See you next time.